Thanks everyone for coming in either to watch the live stream or the recording. My name is Matt Ainsworth, Sales Manager for TechOn, representing TechOn on the east side. Only been here around 6 months now, since February this year, back in Sydney, which is also home. I've been away for a while in Japan and Perth, which is where Flic is currently at, and we'll obviously explore a bit more into what she's doing. But if you don't know who I am and what I do, essentially I help startups get access to remote developers on a kind of resource by resource basis, extending your dev team. Anyway, but it's not about me today. It's definitely all about Flic, and we're covering some maybe not so commonly covered topics when we look at things like invisible disability, which Flic is much better positioned to explain and define, inclusive leadership, and building sustainable businesses as well. And she brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and insight across San Francisco, Silicon Valley, of course, Melbourne, and now Perth. So welcome, Flic. Excited to get into all your wisdom that you can share with the people that are watching today or watching later.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me, and hello to everyone that's either watching live or watching after the fact. I'm really excited to talk about, as you said, something that doesn't normally get maybe as explored as much in the startup space in particular, but I think that's even more of a reason to have this chat. So I'm excited.
Maybe we'll start off with a quick intro from you, and then do you want to kind of help the audience understand what do we mean by, especially like some of the terms we've used, invisible disability, inclusive leadership, and maybe your kind of take on, building a sustainable business.
Yeah, sure. Definitely topics that a lot of people really aren't still aware of, and that's largely because there's not an awful lot of representation across the media and the landscape, generally speaking, about invisible disability and inclusion and the importance of it and the benefits of it, really. Invisible disability, essentially, as the title means, it means it's something that you can't see but is still affecting the person on a day-to-day basis. Interestingly enough, again, because we don't have that representation, I would say that if you mention the word disability, majority of people are still going to derive an image in their mind of somebody that's using some kind of mobility aid, for example, a wheelchair, a walking cane, and so on. And of course, that's a beautiful part of our community, of the disability community, which I hope are still getting included and talked about and put in leadership positions because they deserve it. But it's actually 80% of disabilities are invisible. And most people don't realize that. So that means you could have an autoimmune condition. So I have multiple autoimmune diseases. You could be dealing with chronic pain, mental health. It could be something to do with neurodivergence. So it's something that you can't see, but is still affecting the whole human. The tricky thing about this is because you can't see it, and also because we've been conditioned to perform wellness in order to not be discriminated against in workplaces, universities, and even at home, it means that people look at you and assume that you have the same capacity as everybody else, and often don't understand that you can have an illness that fluctuates and changes on a day-to-day basis and affects absolutely everything that you do, and that you can just simply look like as if you're well at the same time. So that's the reality that I've been living through my life. I got my first diagnosis at the age of 13, and suddenly found myself in a world that definitely didn't accept people like me, didn't understand people like me. And when they got wind of me having these kinds of conditions, immediately reduced me down to being of no value, of having nothing to offer and having no capacity to do anything. And so I suddenly, found myself as a teenager going, hang on, why is this going? It's completely out of my control. I didn't decide to have any of these conditions. Why does that suddenly mean that I have no worth anymore? And so I've spent probably majority of my life from the start of my career, which was actually as a professional dancer and choreographer, which I know with disability sounds like, how did you make that work? But that largely sent me on this route of huge amounts of study and research and getting loads of qualifications to try to put myself in a position where I could thrive in environments that were not designed for me. And through that, I realized actually there's loads of people like me just trying to get out there and live day to day. And many of us have something really amazing to offer the world. And we have an important perspective because we
Mm.
live with adversity every single day of our lives. And that actually makes you a fantastic leader, a fantastic project manager, a fantastic people leader. And so I really try to get out now and create environments as well as general awareness and education. So I have a business that's all around inclusion and accessibility. We go out, we run workshops and keynotes and do all sorts of training, but a whole arm of that business now through my Silicon Valley experience really led me to focus on the fact that generally speaking, the startup scene is not at all accessible for people like
Mm.
myself. And yet we actually make up 30% of all successful entrepreneurs in the world. And so I
Wow.
think there is massive money that is being missed, massive opportunity that is being missed. And so I'm the square peg in the round hole that works in a lot of accelerator programs. I try to support the founders, of course, normal things, building out your MVP, looking at your cogs, your financials, all of the stuff that goes with being an entrepreneur. But at the same time, I'm in there weaving genuine, sustainable well-being tips. I'm talking to people about being more accessible and inclusive and slowly starting to actually educate some of the accelerator programs to do it differently to make sure that there is space for people like myself because we have a lot to offer.
Yeah, awesome. 30%, and I think it's not something like it's not a stat that would be readily available or widely published. Um, yeah, like where do you get that information from? And
Yeah.
how can we find out more about this kind of stuff too?
Yeah, so you're right. It is hard to find this information. You're not going to find it
Mm.
with one simple like Google search because again, there's so little overall research and money spent on people like myself, even though we make
Yep,
up such a big portion of the population. So things
sure.
like you have to kind of combine like the Gallup report every year, you look at
Mm.
Deloitte reports and so on. And we do a lot of work even within our own company. So when I go out and, work in different people's organizations, I'm essentially doing an accessibility, inclusion, and well-being overhaul, and really looking at what is going on in their environment, looking at the stats within their own company, and between that and the community, you would be amazed at how much. Like I sort of call us the shadow dwellers, but we work in conjunction with each other as a community to provide information and research and information because we don't have access to it in any other way. And so we are
Right.
filled with forums and WhatsApp groups, and we jump online with each other all the time. And where you would often see a lot of competition in business, we actually work much more as a collective, as a community, and
Hmm.
we say, hey, I worked at this organization, here's the information that I learned from this, and apparently you can charge X, Y, and Z for that, and there's a market for this thing, and we're all helping each other to fill the gaps where they're just not existing at the moment.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess that kind of is a good segue into inclusive leadership, which I guess is as opposed to exclusive leadership, you know, bringing people together and not really worrying about, background or ethnicity or, cultural or religious differences. It's more about just creating community. And like, I don't know, I'm in two minds because when I look at Perth or when I look at the international community in Japan, where I spent 8 years, I think they did a lot of things really, really well to bring people together. But
Mhm.
obviously, you know, it's sometimes you might, I don't know, like, mm, just by bias or just how naturally people are, exclude people unintentionally as well. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, by like in Melbourne and Perth, how did you find, if we look at inclusive leadership or even invisible disability, what were the differences between there and say San Fran, your experiences there?
Well, look, in all honesty, I would tell you that at the time that I was in San Fran, and I can't speak to it in 2025, but I can
Sure.
speak to it during the 4 years that I was there, it was a deeply, deeply non inclusive
Mm.
environment to be in. And I mean that really to the nth degree. It was an environment where anything that ultimately differentiated you as a human being was not valued. And this sounds counterintuitive to all innovation because it is. But the reality is there was definitely a stereotype of the kind of person that was going to be listened to, was going to be worked with, promoted, funded, and so on. And I definitely didn't fit any of those categories. And I learnt, honestly, within my first week of being in Silicon Valley, with the intensity of the environment, the high level of expectation to hustle and perform, it is a 24/7 environment in Silicon Valley. There is no
Right.
days off, there is no room for anything, and was deeply frowned upon at the time to do anything that would be considered self-care or well-being or anything at all. So if you were dealing with anxiety, a mental health condition, pain, illness, anything at all, you would never say it. You would do everything to cover it up, because that is not how you want to stand out in that environment. You were
Yep.
pretty much punished for it, in all honesty. So I learned very quickly in that environment that it was not open for people like me. And so that period of time for me was very, very challenging, trying to find my footing and learn as much as I could from that environment without being discriminated against. I'm hopeful that that will slowly change over time, but America is a deeply competitive environment, and
Yep.
that there is a lot of, as we know, even just from watching the news, there's a lot of turmoil in the country, and there was turmoil at the time that I was there as well. So a very divisive place to be. Lots that I learned, which was brilliant, but lots that I learned that was like, oh, that's a what not to do
Yep.
rather than a
Okay.
what to do. Whereas, Melbourne and Perth, I think there is a bit more openness to it in general. There's a more openness, I think, to diversity across the board. So you see more, people from an international background being more readily accepted and open to those things. Having said that, I wouldn't necessarily say that all cultural aspects are really being included. There's still a lack of accessibility in a lot of ways. We do have one beautiful accelerator program here in Australia called Remarkable, which is designed for people building something for the disability community, and that is rare, incredibly rare, and they do a wonderful job. I've had the pleasure of coaching in their program this year, so that was a really interesting experience. I think there's more people listening now because there is slowly becoming a little bit more coverage of certain types of invisible conditions. We know that neurodivergence is getting a massive publicity this year,
Yep.
which hopefully creates the opening for us to discuss other things like chronic illnesses and mental illnesses as well. So it's becoming more inclusive over time. But like you mentioned, bias is a big thing that holds everybody back. And I would say that most people that consider themselves to be very open-minded and very inclusive are still harboring some subconscious biases that are there just
Yep.
based on the way that they've been raised and what they've been exposed to. And
Right.
we've got to remember at the end of the day, our brain only knows what it's been exposed to. So whatever's
Yep.
been reinforced most wins, and most people don't look beyond that. So for a lot of people, it's very confronting when you actually say to them, I know that you mean well, but you're actually doing something that's very, very discriminatory without you realizing it. So it's a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and there's a lot of education still needed in the space.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I just finished Jason Calacanis, is it? Book Angel,
Yep.
the audiobook, and it's, you know, very what's the word? Insightful into the San Francisco Silicon Valley ecosystem, how cutthroat or ruthless investors can be,
Yep.
and even himself personally. But
Yes, I worked for
also,
Jason for a short period of time when I was
oh
in Silicon
wow,
Valley.
okay,
Yep.
that's
And I
interesting. Well,
helped
that's a
helped put on one of his launch events, the big startup event that happens in Silicon Valley most years. Yep. So
yep, yep.
I have seen behind the curtain.
Wow. Okay, there's a separate conversation
Yeah, it's a
after
separate
this.
conversation. But yeah, look, I would definitely 100% cutthroat environment. And that's what I mean by saying you didn't want to do anything that differentiated you in a personal way. So
Mm,
what I would find in private conversations with a lot of people is that, and I would say most people were struggling in a multitude of ways. And that's why you see so much burnout coming out of the startup scene, particularly in places like Silicon Valley in the UK, because the intensity, the expectation of it means you have to be devoid of all your human needs. And that's
mm,
an impossibility. At some point, you will break under the pressure. And so that's what I saw a lot of. And so, really, when I came back to Australia and was building my own businesses, I was like, I am not repeating any of that. It was such for me, an alarming I think experience in a lot of ways. Like I said, I'm not slamming all of it because I learnt brilliant things that I apply in business today, and I'm deeply grateful for that knowledge and that experience. But it definitely changed me and changed my view on how to approach things.
Yeah, I see. Interesting. Um, so then I guess like looking at I know so if we moved to San Fran, obviously to Melbourne and now Perth. You're obviously doing the same work, and I saw you speaking recently at was it Gold Coast?
Yes. Yeah.
What was that again? What was that event again?
That was called the Healthy Aging Summit. So,
Cool.
yeah, I was really talking about my community, but from an aged perspective, and really speaking to rooms filled with practitioners of different kinds, allied health professionals, aged care professionals, and trying to, again, not just give them awareness, but actually give them tools that are applicable to help them to work with the community. Because, again, a lot of them don't realise how prevalent invisible illness actually is in aged care. And therefore, unfortunately, how inaccessible a lot of aged care facilities and providers actually are. So it was just giving them an opportunity to talk about that, and also to talk about the reality that the first time that they meet somebody with a chronic illness or a disability, particularly if it's invisible, the
Mm,
multitude of layers of discrimination, trauma, and other experiences that can already be in that person on arrival, and how to approach with genuine compassion and care, and give them the best shot at a life that's a quality of life, because ultimately that's what we all want.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's great to see you just getting out there and spreading awareness and like talking about, what it is to be like invisible or what it is to be inclusive, as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that brings us to kind of like one of the main points we wanted to cover was about building in businesses that support, well-being. And I guess in recent years, and especially COVID and after post-COVID world, like or Australia and in Silicon Valley too, there's a little bit more of a push towards founder well-being and less trying to save yourself from burnout. And and even when you're raising funds with investors, like supporting yourself, so allocating some capital for a salary, and that's quite a controversial topic, I know, for some investors, but like that push towards well-being, I feel, would start to open the conversation up a little bit towards building more inclusive communities. But
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no, definitely. Look, one little correction I will say is that we are not in a post-COVID world. So this is one thing that comes up for a lot of people with invisible illness. We tend to have a lot of immunocompromised people. I'm one of them. The world is now
Oh,
a very dangerous place for me. So COVID still exists. It kills people every single week. We are not in a post-COVID world. The pandemic
sure.
goes on. We've just adapted to it broadly,
Yep.
with the
Yep.
able-bodied community have. But beyond that, I think when we're talking about building those inclusive businesses, it really comes down to thinking of us as kind of your hidden advantage, rather than thinking of us as a burden or something that you have to do extra things for, spend more money on, spend more time on. It's to really change the mindset around it, and realize that we are an advantage. I mean, the statistics are readily available about the fiscal benefits to your company for including us in your employees. I mean, it's massive benefits. It opens up demographics and marketing that you would never have been able to sell your products and services to. It
Right.
opens up, more a feeling of openness to diversity. We provide, again, like I was talking about before, we face adversity. We have to be advocates constantly for our well-being. We have a lot of thought leadership as a result of that. So there's a lot of ways that we positively influence workplaces when we are included. But I think really the first step is that we need to make environments safe in the first place. And I say safe because safe is not just a physical element, it's also the psychosocial aspect of safety. And we have a lot more talk about that now, as you mentioned, just with people being broadly a bit more talking about well-being and things like that. But it's a really big one. And in order to be safe, we need to actually really look at, well, is this environment even safe for the person to feel comfortable to talk about what their access needs actually are? Or to adjust something that's going to position them to thrive in that workplace. Most environments still are not safe. The biases still exist. People don't understand. They don't necessarily want to learn. So our first big hurdle really is that, making sure that our workplaces are actually safe enough in the first place that your employees can come and tell you when they have something going on that they need or they require support in some way. This is not to say that everyone has to declare that they have a disability, because that's actually not legally. You do not have to declare that you have a
Yep.
disability, but you'd be amazed at the difference of when people start to be in a safer environment and start to talk about what their needs are. It positively benefits everybody, because then all the able-bodied people start coming forward with their things too and saying, actually, you know what, yeah, my productive hours, I can't do a 2-hour meeting because after the first hour I can't concentrate. So it opens up the broader conversation with, how do we structure our businesses? What are the systemic changes that we can actually make? And we see an increase in productivity rather than a decrease when we have inclusivity in our businesses and our startups, because then we stop doing the things that have been reinforced to the point where we think that they're normal. We actually have the opportunity to address whether or not something is working for our workplace. And most workplaces in Australia and broadly across the world, you might pay your employees for 8 hours, but you are not getting 8 hours of productivity, I can promise you, because we are
Right.
not
Right.
designed to work in that system in the first place. So when you
Yep.
start being more open to inclusivity, you start really understanding what those terms mean, like what is productivity, what is work, what is quality work, and we can be the instigator of that. It's a really powerful thing that we actually bring. But the first thing definitely is this environment even safe enough for someone? Like, if you're a leader, do you think that your team is actually telling you everything that they need to tell you? Because statistically, if every 10 people, 3 or 4 of those have got some kind of disability. So if you're sitting there and 10 of those people, none of them have come forward with something, start asking yourself that question. What do I need to do to make this environment safe enough for people to come and actually have that conversation with me in the first place? That's where it
Yep.
starts.
I guess self-reflection is important, asking yourself, but like, what else? What's one more thing that leaders can do with their team, to start to build a safer, or at least if it's not safe, then something that is starting to look like more safe environment or community
Yeah.
or feel.
A big one, I would say, honestly, is training. And I'm not saying this because I'm a provider of training, I mean it very
Mm,
genuinely. It's really interesting that, even when I was working in corporate settings or even when I was in Silicon Valley, you might have someone come in and do a half day training or something like that. But when I really looked at it, it wasn't training, it was just awareness. Training means there's something applicable that will come out of that. And so awareness has its place, but I think a lot of businesses still do awareness rather than actual training.
yep.
Awareness is really easy to do because on the surface level, it ticks a beautiful box and it makes you look briefly as though you're doing the right thing. But what
Right.
we would often notice too is that the leaders would not attend that
Mm,
training or that awareness session. This is a really massive signal to your team. So if you are going to embark on this kind of thing, for example, there are loads of people from my community out there that go in and do inclusivity training. They talk about invisible disability and so
hmm
on. Hire us, pay us. Please don't ask us to do it for free. This is the most common thing that comes.
Sure.
We are experts in our field. Please pay us. So bring us in, actually have us do training and make sure that the leadership team is in the room. Have them sit there. They should be involved. No getting on the phone. No walking out of the room. Because what really happens then is we really need to understand that whenever there's a leader in a room, we are looking to them. We are signaling to them of what's appropriate and what's okay. If the
Yep.
leader is in the room and they're engaged with it, we get the message that however we are differentiated is okay and that we belong. Therefore, it automatically makes us feel safer to be in that environment. We're more likely to come to you and say, hey, I've been dealing with X, Y, and Z. These are the
hmm
supports that I need.
Mm,
But if the leader does not attend, we know that this is a box ticking exercise. It actually compounds any stress and fear that you have about coming and saying, I need support in these areas.
yep.
And what we see is generally speaking, if someone has gone and done that sort of thing, they've brought somebody in to speak, and the leaders are not in the room or they get up and they leave, the attendees who do have a disability or some kind of situation going on, they are more likely to actually leave the company than not, right? Because
I
it
see.
puts distrust in the situation. So that's the big thing really is if you're going to do it, be in the room and do it properly. It's not box ticking because it signals the wrong thing. And the other note on that too is please bring in people with lived experience.
Yep,
Please.
yep.
Like it's paramountly important. So if you're going to talk about well-being, make sure that person actually has well-being qualifications. They understand how to broadly, put that through the community and make it applicable. You know, give somebody something to walk away with that they can actually apply today. That's really the key.
Yep. I know from leadership experience and mentoring and just working in communicate, like all kinds of training kind of environments, there's never one approach as well to get, I don't know, this is the wrong choice of words, to get someone to talk or to get people to feel open. Obviously, as a leader, you're setting the tone, you're setting a bit of a culture. Sometimes people will look up to you, or it's kind of like their first experience for the culture of the startup, the culture of the team. Um, you know, from their first interaction with talking on the phone for a role, all the way to joining the company. So it's also, I would dare say, important to understand that there's not one fixed approach for building trust with your team as well. Like you've kind of, with some people, you've probably got to be a little bit more persistent. With some people, you've got to kind of build the trust over time, hold back a little bit, wait for them to come to you. And, even those are only two approaches, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. It's very nuanced, and there is individuals that have different approaches and different needs. And as I mentioned before, everyone comes into that startup or that workplace environment with their own history that we know nothing about. And so
correct.
some people who may have had, very little discrimination or trauma or other things that have gone on in their background, they may fall into the culture and click into place really easily and find that trust and respect really fast.
Yep.
Other people may take a little time because their
Mm,
guard is up. They're in self-protection mode. They're trying to work out, am I safe here? What parts of me am I supposed to be suppressing in this environment in order to fit in? So I think
mm,
part of it too is as leaders is respecting that people come with their own stuff and that they're not going to immediately mold themselves to the environment. In many ways, I think it's our job as leaders to mold the environment to the people. That's when we see people thrive. So if the structure doesn't work for everybody, then not everyone's just going to click into it. We need to yes, have systems and structures in place, but be flexible enough to make it adaptive to the actual diversity of our human population, which is
yeah.
deeply diverse. Diversity is actually normal. That's completely normal. I think if we look at it that way, we then, understand that people are going to take their individual time and, as you said, different approaches are going to work with different people. But if there are any thought leaders or founders or people that are in a CEO position or HR people watching this or listening to this at the moment, I would say one thing I've learned as a leader is to harness my vulnerability as a strength. And I think that when we really look at any relationship that we have, whether it's with a client, whether it's a staff member, whether it's with our partner, our mum, our dad, whoever it may be, the glue that holds that together is vulnerability. When we are able to sit in whatever we're dealing with, our feelings, our experiences, really authentically, which requires practice because it's not what we're taught to do. This is
Yep.
a really deeply healthy thing to do, and it signals to the people around us that it's also okay for them to come with the package deal of what they are, with all the other stuff that comes with it. And when we show them that, we create environments where people are more likely to then be in their vulnerability. And when one person's vulnerability and another person's vulnerability meet on equal terms, and we take that sense of authority away in that moment, that's where connection and bond is created. From there,
Mm,
you can have tough conversations. You can get into the weeds with people in that place. But if we, as leaders, are not willing to do the work to learn how to sit in our vulnerability, the discomfort of being a leader, of making tough decisions, of going through the bumps and the challenges, then there is no way that we can ultimately deeply connect with our staff members and
Yeah,
create an
sure.
environment where that safety and well-being exists. So it really does start with us. It's not about finding all the right people. We often think about trying to find the right people to fit into the culture. We need to create the culture, and that starts with us and having that self-awareness and doing the self-work, I think.
So, like, I mean, as startup founders, we preach, you need to get inside the mind of the customer, right? When they're trying to, and then, after reading this book, Angel by Jason, like, if they want to raise, then, ideally they get into the mind of the investor so they can see from their point of view what the investor is looking for. If you're a leader, it's almost like you need to get inside the mind of your team to really understand what they're going through too. So I guess my question is like, going back to your point about, awareness is not enough. They need to kind of take it one step further. What is that next step after awareness?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, the awareness obviously is the starting point. That's scratching the surface, and it's helpful in its own kind of way. But yeah, it's definitely not the only step. I think it's really not necessarily even waiting for somebody on your team to come to you and say, "Hey, I have this disability," or "Hey, English is not my first language and I
Mm,
need X, Y, and Z in place." It's not making assumptions based on what you observe. So, this is the tricky thing. Yes, you need to be aware as a leader and you need to try and understand your people. But remembering when we do that, we're still looking ultimately from our perspective. So, what we need to do, firstly, I think, is really just accept that diversity exists and that that is what is normal. And I mean diversity in culture, language, sexuality, gender, broadly, right? So,
yeah.
diversity exists everywhere. And if we come from that approach, that means that we can start doing things like having somebody come in from a different cultural background who isn't, English speaking as a first language. We can bring in somebody that has a visible disability, somebody that has an invisible disability, someone that's talking about mental health, neurodivergence, a whole range of different things. Bring them in, do a lunch and learn. Like, when we do this, then we're not making assumptions that, oh, this person in my team is dealing with X, and so now I've ticked the box. We're just broadly opening it up and saying, we know that diversity is important and normal, and we're going to talk about it. This not only, again, helps your team to feel safe to eventually, if they want to, come and talk to you about what those supports are or those experiences are that they're having, but it means that your team is also starting to get that awareness and education about the diversity of customer, the diversity of investor, the diversity of client that you're
Mm,
ultimately going to be dealing with. If we only stay inside the bubble of what we're exposed to, and we all seem to largely come from a similar background, similar age, similar experiences, there is no way realistically that we're going to be that great at marketing to or pitching to people from a completely different background. So I
yeah.
think the more that we just make it part of the norm, even if we are all 30-year-olds who are English speaking and have Caucasian background, there's no reason why that training can't be broader than that. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
we just need to make it open. The more exposure we have, the more our brain becomes aware that the world is wider and that there is more perspective.
Hmm.
And it challenges our biases. And that's really important too. It gives us an opportunity to go, why is this thing rising up inside me when this person said, and it's counter to what I believe? You
Yeah.
think this is a place then to go, well, hang on, before I start an argument about that thing, why is it rising up in me? So these things give us an opportunity to address our biases and to really do that work. I think that, it's a really important aspect of doing awareness training and making those environments open.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you've had your fair share of diverse experiences across the two different cities that you've lived in. So, what do you think are some of the key learnings for you? Um, I guess we can talk about each one, or if there's a general kind of realization that you want to share, I'll leave it
Do you
to
mean in
you.
terms of diversity or?
As a leader, yeah, if we're building this kind of perspective from a leader's point of view, from your own experience as a leader, and working with leaders maybe as well. What are some of the things that you've learned over time, especially when it comes to building a startup or leading a startup?
Yeah. Um, I think that that sense of openness to being challenged, to whether it's your biases are being challenged or your preconceived notions are being challenged, your education is being challenged, whatever it may be, it somewhat comes with the territory.
Hmm.
Being in that leadership position, and particularly if you're going to be in a startup, you're going to face loads of challenges. It's just par for the course. That
Yep.
doesn't mean though that there's no room for your needs, that there's no room for you to be a human being, that there's no room for your wellness or your self care or education. Like all of that is really inclusive in the package. And what I've really learnt by being an actual people leader now, actually having worked and had a team and all of those kinds of things, is everyone's got their own unique skill set and gift. And just because you've hired them for X, Y, and Z role doesn't mean that the definition that you have of that role is the perfect fit for that person. I think in some ways our job is to, yes, hire the person that we think is going to elevate and do a particular role well. But once they're
Mm.
in the team, and if we've been vulnerable enough and we've been open enough to listen and to observe what this person's natural gifts are and what their goals are and things like that, sometimes it's well beyond the title of that job.
Yep.
And I think I see a lot of founders get very concerned about that when they have a team member come on board and maybe they've been hired as I don't know, like a developer or something like that. But then this person has all these other interests and other things that they want to do. There's a tendency for us to try to kind of close the loop around that person and sort of say, no, 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 I hired you for this parallel and I need you to
Right.
stay exactly here.
Mm.
What I've really learnt though is that there's a million different ways that you can craft the role to fit the person, or even craft the projects. Just because if you've got a team with multiple developers on it, or you've got multiple designers or multiple project managers or whatever else, then as the leader, actually pick the appropriate project for the person. Allow them to develop and explore the things that interest them and excite them and allow them to grow. This is a huge benefit for your business. They're much more likely to be innovative, they're incentivized to do the work, they come in excited and keen, they collaborate more, they feel like they belong, and they can see themselves growing in that environment. And it changes the culture so much when we're
Mm.
actually open to what people bring. And that includes the diversity of their background and their knowledge and things like that. So when someone comes to you and says, oh, I'm doing this thing on the side, or I'm really working on that, or one day I'd like to have my own business that's about X, Y, and Z, this should not ideally be a fear factor for you. If it is, again, recognition in that moment of why is this rising up in me and what work do I need to do as a leader? That's one thing. But the other thing is to go, great, then how can I tailor what they do or put them with a particular client maybe that we've got on board that's in that industry or area and invest in them. Really, as a leader, you want your team to outgrow you. That
Mm.
really should be the key, because when they outgrow you, it means that you've done something right and it means that your business is actually going to scale and grow. If you keep people where they are when they started, they're probably not going to be with you for very long. And in a startup
Yep.
environment, that's really important too, because it's challenging. So allow it to be a good challenge rather than just like a hard work challenge. So yeah, that's something that I've observed and have put in place with team members that I've had on board, and it's been amazing to watch some of them outgrow me and go off and start their own businesses, and they come back to me and say, my God, I would not have been able to build this business if I hadn't have done X, Y, and Z with you. I never would have had the knowledge to do that. And you end up having reciprocal collaborations in business with people long after they have grown and left your team. It's a beautiful thing. I thoroughly encourage it. So yeah, create an environment where people can grow and you will grow as well.
Yeah. One, it was a quote that I heard from someone. I can't remember who it was now, but they said like the sign of a great leader is someone who is able to make their own role redundant and allow their team member to, kind of almost grow into their
Yep.
role and, you know, um, so that, I mean, obviously that reduces key dependency and key risk on a person, but
Mm-hmm.
naturally, empowers people to obviously level up and challenge themselves and, you know, grow in their ability to make better decisions, have greater discretion, all that kind of stuff, have more
Yeah.
confidence in themselves. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a really, it's actually a really fun thing. It's a really fun thing to watch people grow. It's a beautiful gift to get
Mm,
to see somebody go on that journey and watch that story arc. It's actually such a privilege, I think, as leaders. We sometimes we can get really caught up in, in the fiscal things and all of the different hats that we're wearing at the time. But if you actually sit back for a minute and realize that you're working with human beings that are living their life, it's an incredible privilege to be in the position that we are and to get them, hopefully facilitate an environment where that development can actually happen and take place. It will be better, yeah, for you and for everyone. And like you said, trying to make yourself redundant. I mean, this is one of the benefits, by the way, of or what I call the hidden advantages of having people with invisible illnesses and other things included in your businesses is because of the nature of what we experience, we always
mm,
have to be planning for the day that we can't have the capacity to do X, Y, and Z. So we are
yep,
great like system builders and stuff like that. So one of the very first things I did as, a founder and a CEO was build everything about my business into systems because I have an awareness that I can't always be front facing.
yep,
Sometimes I have to take a back seat. So I have to position any team that I'm working with to be able to be in the driver's seat at any given time. And as a result of that, yeah, like I'm fully capable of just sitting back for weeks at a time and knowing that everything is in place for someone else in my team to step into a leadership role and take over and do things because it's all inside there. But that's also a huge productivity win. It saves time, it saves money, it means that you can onboard people faster. Like there's lots of pros to it. So some of the things that, people of diversity do bring to your business is having those skills because by the very nature of what they experience, they are experts at it. They don't have to be
yep,
taught. They bring it with them. So there's lots of ways that that's a huge thing.
yeah. I cloned myself on ChatGPT. I made a sales and marketing, basically GPT for TechOn, which is, I mean, it
Awesome.
needs more updating now because it's probably a little bit obsolete, after a couple of months. But yeah, like to clone like all the documents and, knowledge and kind of systems that you've built over time in a business, especially when it's only you or it's me.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's the thing too.
yeah,
Don't wait until you actually have a team, by the way.
that's right.
Founders, start
That's right.
systemizing it now. Start
Yeah,
preparing for a
documenting and
scale.
systemizing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, let's talk a little bit more, should I say, about inclusive leadership, and what can we start to do? I mean, we've talked a little bit about what kind of leaders can do, to be more inclusive, I guess.
Hmm.
How can we make it, um, like if let's talk about we go on a team event, for
Hmm.
example, or we have a team meeting, or, in these kind of regular occurrences, let's say within a team environment, what should leaders be prioritizing or thinking about to start to build more, inclusive? And it's not even leadership, it's also culture and morale and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think first of all, understanding that I know we all like to think of people getting together and that being a really important thing. It's been something that's been normalized for a long time.
mm,
But not everybody thrives in an environment where there's lots of noise and stimulation and people around them. Some people that might be on the spectrum of neurodiversity, some people don't flourish in that environment. So don't necessarily make everything mandatory. If you actually have something really important to share, like there's a milestone or you're changing direction of the company or you've got something new planned, do that separately. do that separately. Have that as a
Mm.
meeting, have that as a brainstorm, have that as a document that is passed around. Do all the important stuff, your bread and butter day to day in your normal processes. Those kinds of get togethers and stuff ideally are an opportunity for just building culture, as you said. I see people trying to wrap those things together a lot, and that places a lot of unnecessary pressure on people that can't necessarily perform well in those environments to show up.
Yep.
And that actually makes it very dangerous for them. So instead, don't make it mandatory. Separate those things out. Make it culture building if you need be. Try to, before you go ahead and plan it, actually think about it inclusively. And what I mean by that is we very often go, oh, let's do an event. And we start brainstorming either with our own mind or with the person
Mm.
next to us. And they're going, let's go
Mm.
bowling. Let's go to a bar. Let's do this thing. And before you
Right.
know it, we've got this fully fledged plan and we're Googling stuff and we're sending off emails about costs and da da da. We're doing all
Yep.
this before even thinking about what our team needs. So, it can be something like, if you've got a communication system like you're using Slack or you're using Teams or whatever it is as a communication system, is putting out the flag to the team and saying, hey, we're going to be doing, a little session. We would love to involve as many people as we can. Is there anything that we should be made aware of? Make an anonymous survey so people are not forced to declare that they've got a specific health condition or whatever else it is, but you can put down a little survey with little drop down boxes or things that people can fill in. Are you immune compromised? Would it be better if this event is outdoors? Would you prefer something that's got a lot of stimulation or something that's a bit more quiet? Give people the option to tell you what works for them. Then go ahead and plan based on the information that you've actually received. Don't do it in reverse. So we very often go, oh, we've booked the bar and we've done the thing and da da da. And then there might be a person in your team that is recovering with addiction. Going to a bar is awful for them.
Yep.
It
Yep.
could be a person like myself that's immune compromised, which means going into a crowd with 500 people is dangerous, can be
Mm.
life and death dangerous. It could be that, oh, we've booked this and da da da, but you haven't considered that somebody's got food allergies. And can they actually eat in that environment? Are they going to be the only person sitting there that can't eat a meal? So provide your team with the opportunity to help you plan the event rather than planning it for them. That's actually going to make it more inclusive and, again, encourages people to go, this environment is safer for me. I can talk to them about what my supports and things are. And where possible, if you're going to do something that's in person, but you've got some team members that are remote or they have a flexible working environment for their health or whatever, make it online, bring them to,
Mm.
put the Zoom thing up, have them included in it,
Yeah.
genuinely, it's actually really quite simple stuff when you think about it. It's just that our approach tends to be reverse because we have adapted to an able-bodied world where the assumption is that everybody can do everything the exact same way. But when we
Yep.
really look at diversity, there's so many reasons why that is not true, and we sometimes force our team members to be involved in things where they're not bonding at all. They're struggling the whole way through it and performing that they're getting along with everybody and that everything is great. So we don't
Mm.
want to compound people's issues. We want to make the environment open to them. So yeah, largely ask them.
Yeah. Right. Do a survey or get in front of them, or even just talk to them. Would it
Yeah.
Yeah, would you be comfortable doing this kind of event? Or I guess, I mean, no doubt, manage, and I've done it myself. As a leader, I made a mistake of doing an event that probably wasn't appropriate for 20% of the attendees. And you kind of learn by making mistakes, but
100%.
you can kind of also use that as a learning experience to say, oh, well, at least the next event I can make it more inclusive. Learning from perhaps, yeah, going to the bar wasn't as appropriate, or um, you know, not forcing, but in kind of mandating in a sense that attendance, or, saying that this is how we build culture, like going to a bar and everyone needs to drink and get on and build relationships. Yeah. So I think sometimes leaders obviously will make mistakes. That's just by human nature, but
Yeah.
I think it's how we rebound from that as well. Like if we've made the
Yeah.
mistake, we can fully admit it and then come back and say, "Oh, sorry, I wasn't I'll do something that's more appropriate for the team, considering, the different dynamics as well." So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an acronym that I use all the time for a
hmm
range of different things, particularly when I go in for training, but it's all ALL. So it's ask, listen, learn. That's it.
mm,
If you
mm,
apply that to your communication, whether it's verbal, written, you know, if you apply it to how you approach your clients, how you approach your marketing, all of it, it will help with all of that. And of course, it does include the learn part, and the learn part is sometimes by mistakes,
yeah,
and it's then coming back and asking the question and saying, how could I have done this better? What would make this more accessible for you, for my team members? And you don't have
mm,
to get to that individual level. As I said, you could start all of this process by making it very anonymous. I encourage that, especially at the start, if it's a new thing for your company, so people aren't forced to say, I want it like this because of X, Y, and Z, or
hmm
whatever else. It can just be, going and doing an event and then submitting another survey after the event and saying, what would have made this, actually say it. What would have made this more accessible for
yeah,
you? If we start using that terminology, you will get genuine feedback from it. And that will help you to formulate. So you're not always going to get it right. You're definitely going to make mistakes. And you'll find that most people are relatively accepting of that if you take accountability and you continue to try and improve, as you said. So, you know, sure, you might already have events in place or you're learning this after the fact. Well, yeah, submit the little anonymous survey afterwards and ask
mm,
people, ask, listen, learn. That's all you're doing. Really, as a leader, if you break it down, that's what you're doing every single day over and over
yeah.
again. Ask, listen, learn, ask, listen, learn, whether that's to your staff member or your client.
But I guess also to kind of iterate, it's okay to make mistakes too. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, I don't know. I feel like sometimes in this environment, like we have to get it right. There's almost sometimes this invisible expectation that we have to deliver on building an inclusive environment from day one, and I think that's impossible for people, especially like you talked about. We have probably these unaware biases that either we've grown up in or we just not aware of ourselves if we're a leader. So I think normalizing the fact that making mistakes is okay, but obviously it's how you deal with it after that, and you know trying to be more open, admit that perhaps you got it wrong, but also like going out to people and saying, what can we do to make it more accessible, like you said. So
Definitely. I mean, I think,
yeah,
that's kind of in part what I was referring to earlier when I was talking
mm,
about harnessing your vulnerability. I
yeah,
think there's this thinking that we have that, again, that has been reinforced so much that we think it's normal when in fact it can't ever match reality, is that your founder, your CEO, anyone in a management position is going to have all the answers and know all the things and be correct all of the time and make
that's right.
every
Yeah.
best possible decision. You're a human being. You're like, that is never going to happen. There will be, I can guarantee you, on a yearly basis, you're going to make at least a handful of massive mistakes that you go, oh, that really hurt, or that fundamentally cost me money or it cost me time
Mm,
or whatever else. You will never get all of it right because you're a human being. You can't get through life without making mistakes sometimes, because maybe you didn't have a proper night's sleep the night before. Maybe you're feeling a bit off color. Maybe there's a death in the family. Like, there's so many things that are contributing to people's decision making on a day-to-day basis, let alone their biases. So I think one way you can do that with your vulnerability is in your communications with people from the get-go. Acknowledge that you don't know everything. It's okay as a CEO to come to your team and say, hey, we've just been confronted with this issue, and I actually don't know what direction to take as of yet. I'm open to listening to what you have to say, and I'm also going to go do some research, and then we can come back together and make that
mm,
decision. You'll be amazed at how much more respect you get for that, how much more people will rally behind you, how much more loyalty people will have to you and the company when you can acknowledge that you are not the be all and end all of everything.
yeah.
It humanizes you. And at the end of the day, we all want to feel as though we can be the human being that we are. We can only do that if the people placed in leadership positions show us that it's okay. And we do that by being the kind of leader that says, I want to plan this thing and I don't really know how to make it completely accessible to everybody. I'm thinking of putting out an anonymous survey and getting some information from you all
Mm,
and planning it. I might not get it all right, but I'm really open to feedback so that I can continue to improve. Immediately is going to like up the percentage of how much you're respected and liked just through that act alone. So apply that to
yeah.
everything. I mean, you
It's that
and also,
transparency. Yeah,
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 just take the pressure off yourself. Like
yeah.
you can't perform at that level all the time. Like
Right, right, right.
that's going to make you have more well-being too. It's way healthier to live from that approach and to, run your startup and your business from that approach and say, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm not going to know everything and I'm probably still got some biases. I want to work on them, but I'm not going to know that I have them until they're highlighted.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we're in it together really, and that's how you build culture.
I'll just point out if you're in the audience listening, feel free to type any questions in the chat. I'm always open, and I'm sure Flick is more than open to answer anything on the fly. But just one final point I wanted to cover before we look at any potential questions. Um, we've talked about in kind of inclusive leadership, but inclusive design is probably more of a broader way of building the culture and the team. And so starting, at the very, I want to say, kind of grassroots level and starting to build that. Um, Obviously, we've talked about how, but why? Why is that a good strategy? Why is that going to help make businesses more scalable? And why is it necessary from your point of view?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it really comes down to, I guess, the same points over and over again, which is really that diversity is the most normal thing in our world.
Mm,
Ideally, all of our businesses, our startups, our workplaces, our universities, our schools are reflective of that. We're slowly seeing the change from the media, very slowly, showing that there is more diversity. That's a
yep.
very slow uphill towards the top of Everest kind of a challenge, but
Mm,
those things filter down, and the more that we see those in the media, the more open we are to talk about them and address them and so on. So it all ultimately filters in the same direction, which is important. And when we are actually thinking about inclusive design for our businesses, it stops us from being caught up in our own ego, and it stops us from being caught up in our own pride, and even as a founder in our own business idea of what this is about. It actually allows us to be more open to how this business idea could be adapted, molded, or iterated to fit a much broader market, the real market that exists that includes diversity. So I think when we are building inclusively and we design, whether
mm,
it's the structure of our workplaces or the systems that we use in them or how we communicate in the culture in our teams, we're broadly starting to create an environment that's reflective of reality, which means that can only increase our ability to market, to iterate our product to a market, to find a bigger demographic, to sell more of our products and services to a wider group of people. And we all have something to bring to the table. So it just means it's making it open for all of us to actually participate and have the quality of life that we so rightly deserve. It shouldn't be for a select few, it should be for everybody, because nothing that we have that comes to the table, whether it's, that we're non-binary or whether it's because we, identify as disabled or whatever it may be, none of these things are disadvantages, and none of these things can stop a person from having the capacity to influence the world in some way. So it's just making the environment more impactful for that. And yes, you will see more attention in your teams. You will see greater market share. You will see greater profit in your business. And you will see an increase in productivity and less money being made fixing mistakes. All the stats are out there that already show that. Huge amounts of research, at least on that part of it, actually have been done. So it's that whole thing of not thinking about inclusivity as being an extra. It is not an extra thing that you tack onto your business. It's not an extra thing you have to spend money on. Not all access needs are expensive in the first place. They're really, really not.
yeah.
It's just kind of going, the world is diverse. Let's participate in the diversity of the world and take a market share of the diversity of the world, rather than going,
Mm,
I'm only designing for somebody that looks, sounds, and acts like me, because that's not reflective of your whole demographic.
yep. Yep. No, that's great. Um, And so I guess that brings us to the top of the hour. It looks like there's no questions in the audience either. But I'm sure you're okay if anyone wants to reach out and connect with you.
Yeah.
What what are the kind of some last words of wisdom you want to leave the audience with? And you're a little CTA if you want to chuck it in.
My little CTO. Um, Gosh, what can I leave you with? I think, hopefully through listening to this, if you've stayed sort of engaged the whole way through, which I hope that you have, that you'll understand that we have a lot to offer, that the world is very diverse, and that there is no disadvantage in including us and getting to know us and working with us. There's massive advantages in it. So, yeah, do what you can to be inclusive. Know that you're going to make some mistakes, and we don't expect you to be perfect all the time. But this process can be such a huge learning curve in a positive way, because it's going to allow you to develop in as a person, it's going to allow you to develop as a leader. It's going to challenge you. And that's a really, really important thing. So if you're a startup founder and you're just looking for the smooth cruise through, number one, don't be in a startup
That doesn't
because
exist,
they're going to
right?
be smooth. But secondly, try and live in the reality that you're in. And, if you can learn to be a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more open, it's only going to make this process more sustainable for you because it's healthier. It's going to, if you are starting to address other people's needs, you're going to start to address your own. This is massively important for building a startup because honestly, more startups fail due to unaddressed mental health issues, unaddressed well-being, burnout, than because they didn't find the right demographic or because they didn't get funding. So honestly, we place so much on all of that, right? And that's great and it has its place, but statistically, that's not what's going to make your business fail. What's going to make your business fail is that you haven't been able to look after yourself and you haven't created an environment where your team can flourish. And you
Yep.
do that by looking inward, asking yourself the difficult questions, giving yourselves exposure to things that are new and different to you and that scare you because you don't know all the answers. And the more that you get comfortable with sitting in the discomfort, the more you harness your vulnerability for good. And that can only connect people and make people thrive and create environments where well-being is actually paramount and at the top. And well-being and inclusivity sit side by side. So when you make one, you make the other at the same time. So it all has flow-on effects. It's all ultimately positive, but it's really you saying, am I able and ready to sit in that very temporary little bit of discomfort to do the growth to get the massive advantage that's going to come from it? So I encourage you to ask yourself that question and do the work. And there's people like me out there. I'm not here to tell you that you're doing it wrong. I'm here to give you the tools to make you be able to do it better, to do it in a way that empowers you and your team. So reach out if you have questions. Reach out if I can assist in any way. I'm passionate about this, but I'm passionate about startups. I think we can all be involved and we can all, thrive together. So I'm here. Reach out to me, flicmanning.com.
And even if you're not there, then you'll fly somewhere. Is that
Yes,
right?
100%. I'm available
Yeah.
online and in person across the world.
And we'll share all of Flick's socials in the description down below as well. So if you want to reach out to Flick and interested in anything she's talked about today, especially on the topics of like invisible disability, building sustainable businesses, and inclusive leadership and design, and culture and teams, of course. Yeah, please reach out to her. And if you're looking to hire any developers for your startup, then please reach out to me. Thanks so much, Flick. Appreciate all your time today. You shared a lot, a very different and not so well explored space, I want to say. And it's good to bring light to this to start that step one, which is like build awareness, which is what you said, right?
Thank you very
So
much. And thanks for the opportunity, Matt. It's like really nice to get to have this chat, but
always,
particularly with a bit more of a startup focus, that's,
indeed.
yeah, it's great. I really appreciate it.
And we're going to speak about Jason after this as well. So looking forward to
Yes,
that.
we will.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for chiming in, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Woohoo.